Hey guys, it's Frankie-Gruesim and this is part 3 of creating clothes for Sims 3. So when we left off we had our pair of pants and we had UV mapped it. I forgot to mention to the UV map, don't start turning parts of your mesh sideways because patterns in Sims 3 go from top to bottom, so if you turn your mesh sideways, all patterns will be sideways, which in some of the cases does look really weird. So what we're going to do is I've added some buttons and some other parts in my mesh between the last tutorial, but I'm still at the same stage. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to first of all align normals so that I can bake it properly. So by pressing L over all my mesh parts or selecting them on this side, so I can say there's this little button down here which is the sync button. So if you press that, it syncs the 2D with the 3D, so everything I select in 2D is also selected in 3D. So for aligning normals, you're going to want to select everything that isn't stuff like buttons. So everything pretty much that's your mesh. The thing is with buttons, I'll show you. So I've selected all the parts except my buttons on my UV map. And I'm just going to press P and then say parent by selection. That makes them a new group. So I'm going to export both my groups. So I can right click, shift, right click the next one and say file, export to wavefront object. And now these settings are important. You need selection only. Don't tick right normals. And untick objects as object groups, untick objects as object objects, and tick objects as object groups. You can save this by pressing plus here. I have it saved here, so I can just select that. And I'm going to export it as E1. I always export it as a new object because I like to save my original case. Now we're going to go into Milkshape, ignore my very untidy desktop. And we're going to import that object in once I figure out where I had it. This looks good. Right. You'll see that because we did it as objects as object groups, we now have two groups. If I select this, you'll see it selects my buttons. And if I select this, you'll see it selects my pants. So you can't see it too much here, but sometimes you get these, here, these seam lines. I'll select only my pant group and say vertex align normals, and you'll see it aligns the normals except spots like here where I didn't properly fix up my seams, and also along this side. So here and there I'm going to need to fix it up first. I just wanted to show you what happens if I do this for the buttons. You'll see the buttons look like flat round buttons. If I align normals, it tries to smooth out the buttons and it just looks stupid. That's why I always say parent of things such as buttons, which are theoretically solid because they're not just flat. So I'm going to go back here and I can see over there where I needed to fix up my mesh, and I'm going to turn on this again and just fix that up, and it seems to be on the other side. We also have some issues. Again, I'm just pressing G to move it, and it's snapping to the vertex closest to it. Got to go under that fold somehow. Why did I undo that? Right. Go back here. We'll only select the pants group now because I don't need to do the buttons. I'll export this. Again, you'll see I have those faint lines down the side, and if I select, say vertex align normals, it aligns the normals to fit with the edits I did, especially those in sculpt mode. Once I've done this, I can export this again, save it over the last one because it's the same thing. And then I'll delete that in here and import the new one. Right. So now that I've done that, my next thing is I need to bake. So I'm going to right-click, shift, right-click the other one and join these groups up again. So I've got the entire group. Now I only want to bake my mesh. So as I showed you last time, I only want my mesh group, which is highlighted, to have the little bake sign, the little camera. So I'm just going to undo all of these and go to edit mode. I'm also only, actually it doesn't matter. Right. So as you can see, I have 1, 2, 3 buttons, and all my buttons, because I duplicated them, have the same UV map. I can do that because each button will have the same texture anyway, so this saves me a lot of space instead of having to do 3 buttons. So I make one, UV map it, and then duplicate it so that it keeps the same UV. So now we're going to bake. So we're going to go to Image, New Image. Now, unlike last time, we can actually already write in a higher resolution here. So we're going to say 2048 by 2048. It doesn't really work higher for clothes. Then we're going to go to this little well button and change these samples to 25. And from last time, we should still have ambient occlusion and 2 set. So we'll bake now. Your bake should be a light grey. If it's a dark grey, that means parts of your mesh are inside out. If you see random shadows on your mesh, that means that you either have another group active accidentally, or you have parts of your mesh that are overlapping in a weird way, like you accidentally have a part of your mesh duplicated. So we'll just let this bake. Right, if I go to texture, you can also see the bake. This is what it looks like. And I'm just going to say image, save as image, and I'll save this as E1 in the same folder. Now the bake isn't very smooth, you can see it's kind of jaggedy looking, doesn't look very nice. Things like this are a massive dent, which I can see, so I'm just going to quickly pull that out again, like this, and just redo the bake. So yeah, take a look at your bake, make sure you don't see any weird shadowy patches that you don't like or that look odd. Also, let's do this first. A good idea to image, open image, and open a UV checker map. And just make sure there's no parts where the UV checker map looks totally stretched or weird, which it doesn't, which is good. Should show relative squares. So let's just bake this again. So I always bake before I decimate my mesh, because obviously I want the bake to be the higher quality, so before I start ripping it to shreds, I'm going to make the bake. So I end up decimating pretty late. I also usually bake before I solidify or extrude my mesh, only in some cases if I also UV map the part that I've decided to solidify, for example for hoods or neck parts, I'll show you later, I would probably solidify that part and then bake, because I also want to bake the inside part because I've decided to separate it from the outside. I'll show you a couple of these examples in a second. Right. Looks good, got rid of that black shadow. Clipping in the legs isn't that big a problem because I'll be deleting the legs underneath anyway. So save this image as E1. Right, so now because of the crappy resolution, what we're going to do is we're going to go to object mode, which we're in. We're going to go here to this modifier, and we're going to say Subdivision Surface, and put it up to 2 views. Do not press apply. Go to edit mode, new image, and bake again. This is going to take a lot longer. What that modifier does is it pretty much, well, each of these little faces you see here, it pretty much puts another vertex in the middle and divides it up into 3. So you're pretty much tripling your poly count by doing it if you press apply, so don't do that. But it also bakes it in the higher quality, so to say, in the higher poly, so you get a way smoother mesh bake. I like to do that for just a nicer texture. Just remember, don't apply the modifier, otherwise your poly count is again through the roof. So just let this finish. Right. You'll see now way smoother shading and shadows here now. So I'm going to go back to my modifier and just unapply that. And I'm going to save this as E2. Right, perfect. You'll see that you have these little dents in here. This is why you've got to bake twice to cancel out these dents later. We'll get that in the next part, which will be the textures. Okay, so once I've baked, I'm now ready to decimate my mesh. Just make sure that the bake looks good so you don't have any black or weird parts. There are 2 ways, well 3 pretty much, to decimate a mesh. So what you can do is you can use Maya or something, or ZBrush, if you know how to use that. Or you can use Blender or Milkshake. So I'm just going to save this. I'm just going to make a copy of this. So I've got the good copy and the bad copy. Okay, I believe that's a good copy. Right, so what I can do here is I can say add modifier decimate. Now there's a couple of ways of decimating, and you'll just have to see, go back to solid, which one's the best. The first thing it does is it tells you your face count here. Now, as I said, it's actually more important what your vertex count is and not your face count as much, but we should try and stay under 10,000 with the body. So my mesh is fine, but I'm just going to show you what it would be like. So what you can do is you can modify this ratio. So say 0.6, and you'll see we've gone down to 3,000 polys. You'll also see these little dots. What this method actually does is it rips up your scenes. So you've got the option. You can see that these points all don't match up anymore. So the best way to fix this is again to go to our magnet tool and say, for example, this, and snap it up here. That means you've also got to untick this and move that bit further up because I snapped it higher. This one's pretty much the same height. I can snap it. Now for this case, I would snap this one to the top. Again, untick that, move that a bit higher. This is just to cancel out any stretching of the texture. And then this one, I would snap to the one above. Oh yeah, you need to also enable vertex here. And then you can, again, snap it here as well. So you've just got to make them line up. This is a bit annoying. For pants, it's not that bad. You've only got the edges, but it's frustrating work. Let's put it that way. Don't worry about shadows. Right, the other method you have is planar, and you can tick seam, which means please do not break up my seams. You can see it makes it, I can fiddle around with this, and the percentage, if I go up with the percent angle, it'll change the poly count. This doesn't look as neat, but it won't rip up your seams. And of course, the last method, let's go back to here, is in Milkshake, so Tools, DirectX Mesh Tool, and you can pull this down. Only do it bit by bit. So I can pull it down a little bit, press save. If it goes black, just say face, smooth all, and keep doing that. So you'll see I've got lines, but if I select vertex, align normals, they'll go away. So my recommendation, milkshape is good if your poly count isn't like super duper high. So let's say, I don't know, you need to go down 1,000 or so with your poly count. Then I use milkshape, it's quickest, I don't need to fix it. If my poly count is like, I don't know what, like 20,000 and I've got to halve it to 10,000, then I use Decimate and I do it bit by bit as well. So I'll do the ratio, maybe go down to 0.6, 0.6, 0.6 and keep doing it. And then I've got to fix up my mesh. More effort, but it doesn't break the mesh as much as doing it in milkshape does. So for massive amount of decimating, I prefer this method. It gives me a nicer mesh at the end. Again, you can use stuff like Maya, which does this method without breaking your seams, because you can again tick the seams button. But yeah, that's pretty much up to you. So at this point you would decimate, you would fix up any seams that have ripped, which you can clearly see because when you seams, if you smooth normals in milkshape, will still show a line if they're not properly fixed. Or here there'll be those flashing little yellow points. Okay, so once you're done decimating, also consider when you're decimating, you have still got to extrude your mesh and you still got to possibly solidify parts, which is going to make your vertex count and your poly count go up. So just make sure you've got that somewhere in the back of your head. So previously I used to solidify most of my meshes. Solidifying pretty much means I copy the mesh, turn it inside out, and put it a bit closer to the inner edge to make it thick. This doubles your poly count and your vertex count, so I do not enjoy doing this anymore. So I'm going to show you a couple of methods of how to do things. So what would I do for these pants? For these pants, well, these the suspenders part I have to solidify. There's no going around that because there's no way I can extrude this. So what I would do is using L, I would select the suspenders parts that need to be solidified. Not that, that's part of the button. Like this, I would press P, parent by selection. And then I can go back to object mode, right click on this group and say add modifier, solidify. You can see what it looks like. And I would just make this a bit thinner because I don't need it that fat. For this, I also want to keep on fill rim. If I undo that, you'll see there will be a gap between this inner and outer layer, which looks weird. So I will do that, and then I can apply it. So because I haven't decimated, another good reason why you should try and make low poly meshes in the first place, because I haven't decimated, you can see all my edges still have this blue line. Once you decimate, some of the edges lose it. But because I haven't, I can use the method to say edge split, untick edge angle, apply. And what it does is, let me just undo it. If I go to edit mode now and I select this, I select the inside layer, the front layer, and the edge layer, which isn't good because it'll try and do what it did with the buttons in milkshape later and try and make it round. It also messes up the texture a bit. So if I then apply this modifier, make sure you untick edge angle. Now I'll go here. That's what I wanted. Press L. You see I've only selected the outside layer, not the inside layer, so it's edge split for me. If you can't do it this way because you no longer have sharp edges around the thing, then you're going to have to do it the normal way, which is select the edge, spacebar, edge split, and do it around all the edges of all the parts. Again, another reason why I try not to have my meshes need decimating, because I can still use that method. Right, now that I've got that, let's go to the pants part. So the pants part's a lot easier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude. So I need to make this fat because actually extruded, because this part, the inner side, is actually invisible in game and you'll just see sky through the pants, which is weird. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select B and I'm going to select the top rim of my pants here. I'm going to press E, click, S, and pull in. And you'll see I make this kind of rim. And all I'm going to do is then I'm just going to use this blue arrow to move it down a bit so that it's not such an obvious rim. So that my texture doesn't stretch, I'm going to, in the 2D window, press G and then X. Press G and then Y. This means I can only move it up and down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it down a bit, judge how far, how much space. So from here to there, that's quite a good bit of space. So let's move it down a bit further. Like this. You can also, if it helps, let's just undo that. Image, and open that UV checker map, go to texture, and now if I do the same thing, select this, select that, just going to hide the body, and go to E, scale. You can see these are no longer square. Oops, I selected the wrong stuff. Make sure you literally only select the top edge. I selected too much and that's never good. Right, E, scale, and you go inward. And then, as I said, use the blue arrow to go down. And now, in the 2D, oh, I've again selected too much. This is when you're trying to do things quickly. E, S, inward, down. That's correct. And then you can see it stretched the texture here, so I'm just going to press GY, move it down until kind of get squares again. Yeah. Once I'm done, press A. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to edge split this, because this is, you pretty much need to split everything that is a sharp edge, so like a 90-degree angle or even more sharp. So this needs to be edge split, so I'm going to select that top rim again, select this top rim again, press spacebar, right in edge, and click edge split. You won't see anything happen in the new Blender, so just press A and then press L. Just do this. So if you manage to select part of your pant without selecting also the inside part you've just done, then you've edge split properly because you've separated the pieces. So as you can see, instead of solidifying the entire mesh, which would mean I would double my poly count, I've literally just added a couple of faces in. So now I'm going to do exactly the same for the bottom. So I've got to do this inner part and this. So I'm going to do it both from here. Nope, just selected the back of this. Try and find the bit that corresponds. Nope, not that part. Also not that part. Okay. Now I'm just going to press E, scale inwards. Here, go up a bit with my blue arrow, and then do exactly the same. G, Y, move it till I get relative squares. As I say, relative. And then again, I'll show you what I mean about the edge splitting. So if I select this now, you can see I also select the part that I extruded into the middle. And now if we edge split this edge, oops, edge split, then if I select this, I now don't select the inner bit as well. So I'm just going to do this for all these parts. The other side as well, E, scale inwards, go up with the blue arrow a bit. G, Y, edit the texture. Try not to go all the way up to the top because I still need to work with the top row of vertices and I don't want to make it difficult to select. So I'm just going to do exactly the same at the top. E, scale, I don't need to go in that much. G, Y, can't really see the texture anyway, so it's not that problematic. You need to bake before you do this because otherwise you've got a lot of overlapping parts here that are going to screw up your bake. If you forget, I'll show you what to do. or if you decide to change bits afterwards. Then what you can always do if you forget to bake is, if you've edge split properly, you can select all the parts of your original mesh without selecting, just pressing L without selecting all the bits you extruded, parent it to a new group, pressing P again, so parent it, make sure only that new group is got the little camera, and then bake again. So just by separating out the new bits, you can do it. So now, here you go, I have got the arms from my test tops. Got this mesh complete without holes, and my poly count isn't so much higher. So now I can right click that, shift right click that, and join my groups up again, and you'll see 4,500 verts and 7,000. So I went from 6,800 to 7,000. So I only went up 200. If I'd solidified the entire thing, I'd be by 12,000. So I had 6,000 more instead of just 200. Makes a difference, doesn't it? So let me just save this, and I want to show you some other ways of doing things. Let me just see what I can open. Right, okay, this one's good. Okay, so this is one of the previous meshes I made. This is a bit more complex. So you can see there's kind of not a circle I can just extrude from here, because this side still goes up and this part does need to be solid. Okay, I don't have the original of this. So what I did is at the, so I need the original. Let me just import this again, see if I can find it again. Toddler. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll just show you what I did. So, obviously, these shoulder parts need to be parented off, and these need to be solidified, because there's no way I can extrude these. So these I would just do as I showed you, solidify them to thickness that I like, apply, add modifier, edge split, untick edge angle, and apply. Now for this part. Here you can see that the rim of the pocket was open, so what I did, you can also use C to select, I selected the edge of the rim, and I extruded it inwards, and then edge split it. Kind of like we did with the shoes, just I didn't scale it, I just went like this, pressed E, and pulled the arrow inwards. That's a good way to fill up edges. For the bottom of the feet, I also extruded. Now, for this part, it was more difficult. So what I did, which is pretty cool, is I went to face select here, and I made sure I was synced, which I am. So I'm also on face select here. And I began to select faces. And I selected faces around the top part, and then kind of faked an edge, as you can see along here. This part. So I had this fake edge. Hello! I had this fake edge, and then what I did is I parented this off. So I separated the top of the pants from the bottom of the pants. So the top of the pants I could now solidify. Again, make it a bit thinner. Apply. And because in edit mode this edge wasn't sharp when I did it, I had to, couldn't use the edge split modifier, and so I had to do the typical edge splitting, which is selecting the edges, make sure you're on edge select, going along, edge split, going along the sides, edge split, and then going along the bottom. Edge split. And now what I could do is I could select the front part, P, parent it off, select the back part, P, parent it off. And now you see I've got this rim along here. Now I don't need this rim at the bottom. I need the rim at the sides, but I don't need the rim at the bottom. So all I did, I don't select the outside vert. I selected all the verts along this bottom rim except the edge one, and I just deleted them. And that makes sure I don't have the rim at the bottom. Right, and now for this part, I now had a rim like this, and a rim at the top of here, and I could extrude just normally as I did. Sometimes instead of going straight down, because you can see it overhangs at the sides, I go up, select it again, GY, go down, and then use S to scale it inwards to fit. And do the same thing here, GY, go down. I don't need to scale in. And then again, as we were doing, go along this edge again and edge split. And then you can press A to select all your groups and just join them again. And then you can see this part is solidified and this part is extruded, and I didn't have to solidify the entire bottom part of my pants. Next thing I wanted to show you, nope. Okay, this is also pretty good. So let's see if I've got a previous version of this hat. No, that's not what I wanted. Let's see if I've got a previous version of a beanie. Okay, I've had this. So with a beanie, you can also do something which is soft rim, which is pretty useful. So what you can do is, again, go on sync, select the bottom, and the first thing I'm going to do is extrude it as I normally would, and just go up and backwards a bit. But I'm not going to edge split this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press W and remove doubles. And now I can select this edge again. And you'll see it selects, one bit I forgot. I still need to move that up for the texture. Okay, so now we're going to remove doubles. And now when I select this rim, it'll select this edge. Now what I'm going to do is press Control and B, pull out a bit, and roll my mouse. And what this does is it makes me a soft edge, like a curved edge. You can see it makes a round edge. I don't need to edge split this because it's no longer a sharp angle but a rounded edge. And that's a cool way of making like a rounded thick edge, which I like to use for beanies, of course. And now I still need to edge split the corners again, because you can see I select one edge and it selects the other one because I deleted the doubles. Edge split. If you delete doubles, you always need to edge split. You'll see I've got to do this for all parts that sew onto each other. Edge split. Edge split. Edge split. And now when I select an area, it shouldn't select any more somewhere randomly else. So that's a way of doing a smooth curved edge, which I mainly use for beanies. Then let me see what else I wanted to show you. Okay, so for the onesie I made, I'll show you what I did. Just delete the previous step. Right, so my onesie had no neck part, so what I did is I selected the neck part, I'm not on sync, I need to be on sync. Like I usually did, front and back. I also did this for the sleeves and the bits around the leg. I'm only going to show you here. I extruded, scaled, but I went up a bit. And I said GY and I just moved it up. And then I said extruded, scaled, and then went down a bit. So I kind of made my own soft edge a bit by making it a bit more rounded. And again, GY, moved it up. And then all I did was, because I wanted to UV this differently, I didn't want to use the texture of this because I wanted it to be a different color later as like a rim. I decided to make it its own UV part. This I did before I baked. This is what I was saying, if you want to UV map it, do it before you bake. I edge split this. Now you can see this part I can just move by selecting it with L and just G and move it. Now this isn't a very nice UV map because it's so curved. So there's this cool plugin. So I'm just going to go to my File, User Preferences, Add-ons, called UV Squares. I'm pretty sure it's linked on the resource page too. So just going to put that on. Now what I can do is I can select this. I need to turn off sync because it won't work with sync. Select this part and say snap to X or Y. And it straightens it out for me. And then obviously I'm just going to move this. I would usually do this by showing my UV squares texture again, but just making it kind of how it should be. I'm pretty good at guessing these days. Okay, so it should look something along those lines. And these parts you can see I then UV mapped and placed somewhere so that they could have a different color and texture. The other thing that I would do this with, let's just make a new thing, is coat with a hood. So let's see. Adult hoodie. Hoodie should do. Nope, that was jeans. So this hood I also did, oops. What I did was I separated the hood from the rest of it, solidified it, and, well actually I didn't edge split it, I beveled it, as you can see. Well, I edge split it and then beveled it or something. And then I took this part, the inner part of the hood, and I see here. You can see the inner part of the hood has a UV here, so I moved it away from the outside because I wanted the inside of the hood to be a different color to the outside part of the hood. So yeah, if you want, if you don't want to use the same texture as the bit you solidified it from, solidify it, edge split, and move it to its own UV part. I like to do that with hood because obviously, if I take the texture from the outside, this part would be light because it's facing the light, and this part would also then be light, even though it's on the inside with folds and it should be dark. So for things that I can see the inside, I like to put it on its own UV area. The other, okay, so coats. This thing was a nightmare. We'll just ignore that. Let's say I have this coat. I'm just going to parent this coat off. Okay, so the top I would just do as I normally do. Extrude the top part, extrude the inner part. That's how I usually do it. With the sleeves, I would again extrude. Now the coat, I have two different ways of being able to do it. So the first thing I can do is to solidify the entire thing. So I could go here and say, solidify, and then edge split. Let's just do that for now. Obviously, I already have 17,400 verts just for the coat without the top because I've solidified the entire thing, which isn't very good. So then I would have to try and just delete as many faces as I can that you can't see under the body. So let's just say, here's my sim. So what I would do is I need to split it. I would select the outside parts that are always visible, like this, parent them off, and then I would go to edit mode, use C, no, I would select the entire thing, and then I would press C in 3D, make it a bigger circle, and press my scroll button, which unselects parts. So by doing that, I would just keep turning it, and this unselects all parts that are visible, kind of. Then I can see, okay, most of the inner sleeves, I should not have solidified the sleeves. I should have done it by parenting off only the coat part. So I'll show you that. So what I should have done is I should have only solidified this part, the sleeves I don't need to solidify, and the bottom of the sleeves I would extrude. So I parent that off. I would solidify this, apply, bit split, apply. Then I would select the outer parts, parent them off, and then I would probably select a good part of the inner parts that I don't need. For example, like this. All parts I probably won't be able to see, most of the back I won't be able to see. Make sure there's nothing visible. You can see still a bit of this back. There we go. Bit of this inner coat here. And then delete faces, so that I have a lower poly count by just deleting the parts I don't need. Right. That's a good way of doing it. Then I could regroup these bits again. So that's one method of doing it, but if I just regroup it with that again, you'll see my poly count is still, oh, I regrouped the wrong stuff. Oh, it's 7,800 now, so that's a lot. Oh, that's only the outside part, not the inside. Okay, we're at 11,000. Still better than 17,000. Right, the other way I usually do it is a bit more complex. Just go backwards all the way. Okay. So what I can do is I can go to Edge Select again, and I'll only show you for one side, but I can extrude. So what I would do is I would select these edges, just shift select these edges, going down here. Pretty much see where it's going all the way along down here. And I would extrude and pull them backwards and also inwards a bit so that it's not so visible that it's so thick. Right. So I would do it for that edge, and then I would do it also for the bottom here. So the bottom consists of this bottom rim, this bottom rim, this, but also the bottom of this. So this is, oh, unpick my other bottom bits. Right now I've got the entire bottom, so I would say extrude, scale, Also forgot that I needed to move that texture along here. And I would do this as I normally would. Now I've got some overlapping here. So what I would do, okay, again, G, Y, or X or whatever, and then to fix it up, select one part of it, G, Y, move it into the texture here, and again, G, Y, move it into the texture here. Do that for all the parts I'm not going to show you now. Now what I was going to do is I would go onto my snap, say vertices, and I would take this make sure I'm vertices select, and snap it up to here. And then I would start snapping. Actually, those three I can just delete, it seems. Delete, vert, and just snap them to here. I shouldn't have deleted those because I deleted that bit. Right. So, oops. 1, 2, just keep snapping them to the bit that I've decided is my edge. Or just move them a bit, so just to create kind of edge. I'm not sure why this part didn't extrude. If it would have extruded, this little hole would be filled too. But in the end, what I'm doing is creating a rim. A bit more effort, but I can show you. It looks like this at the end. So this is the rim I created. So just by extruding and then snapping the parts together, I can create a rim. And in the end, I'll just open this up again. You'll see that I got to a poly count of 9,700 with the t-shirt underneath. So this part itself, fully extruded. And remember, it was 17,000 when I solidified it. And it's now total poly of 8,000-ish. So yeah, I save a lot of space by doing that. This is a bit more complicated method to do it, but it also works. And if I put the body underneath, you'll see that I pretty much extruded it right into the body here. So yeah, that's a bit more complicated way to do it. I can help people with that more, but it's a good way of doing open coats without having to decimate it to hell because you want to solidify it later. So let's go back to our pants. Oops. So we've now completed solidifying it. We've fixed our seams and everything. So now what we're going to do is we're going to export it ready for milkshake later on. So what we're going to do is, I'll show you what happens. If I take the entire thing, export away from object, and I export it to E1, just going to overwrite this. Again, make sure selection only, don't tick write materials, objects of this group. If I do E1, I select this and I say vertex align normals. I get these wonderful black horrible rims everywhere, which I don't want. And this is because it tries, just like it did with the buttons, to make the sharp edge look smooth by making it really, really shadowed. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to edit mode. I'm going to press L, and because I've edge split properly, it does not select the inner part, and I'm going to select all the outer parts of my mesh. Oops. So all the parts I had originally. That. These extra parts I made. Oops, no, that's rim of a button. No, edge select is easier. Like this. And then I'm just going to say P, parent by selection. And then I'm going to select all the bits I extruded. And also the inner parts, so that only the edges are left. Now, those inner parts are difficult to see at the moment. I think I've got them. Yep. And oops. Again, P, parent by selection. So now I've pretty much, oops, lazy. Somehow I accidentally selected that. I don't want that. Only the inner parts. And sometimes this is hard work. And my rims. P, parent by selection. So you can split it up into many groups as you want. And then if I now export to wavefront object E1, again make sure all your things are ticked. You'll see I now have multiple groups here that I selected. So if I select this group, you can see it's just the button and the outside rim group. So I'm not going to do anything with that group. If I select this, it's main mesh. So I'm going to say vertex, align normals with only this group selected. Unselect. Select the next one. You can see this has the inside part here. Again, vertex, align normals. Or cat's normal smoother, there's two ways of doing it. Unselect that, select that group, vertex, cat's normal smoother. You can see it smoothes this part now, and even better, you can see this part under the looks ridiculous. If I say align normals, it looks normal. So now I just align normals for each group individually. That means I don't get any black lines. And then I can say edit, select all, regroup, and I'm just going to export this again as my wavefront object. File. That's E1. And end this part here. Next time I'll be showing you textures.